Obviously, one of the big needs for the Oilers now, even more so than before, with Oscar Klefbom out of the lineup, seemingly for the start of the season, and who knows what his status is going to be, the onus is on the Oilers to replace him in the lineup. And, Matty, you've long talked about the Oilers' needs for a right shot defenseman. Is a guy like Tyson Barrie the kind of player they need to target?
I would say yes, although he's a right shot, and Oscar Klefbom, if he can't play, is a left shot. So you really need a left shot defenseman. Yeah. Because the only real left shot ones they've got are Darnell Nurse and Chris Russell, and then Caleb Jones, I guess, could play left side. So I would say yes. Tyson Barrie would be very high on their list. But I don't know if the Oilers would be prepared to go long term on him. I think short term they might be able to buck up and give him, what a player of Tyson Barrie's stature, would want, between $4 and $5 million. And theoretically, you would like to get a player who could just replace the same salary that Klefbom was going to be making, which is 4.1. I don't know if Barrie would take $4 million, and I think there's going to be quite a few teams interested in Tyson Barrie on a short-term deal. So, long answer to a short question: yes, I think they would be very interested in Tyson Barrie. And he's from Victoria, so he wouldn't be going too far away. But I think the Oilers with their cap situation is still pretty tight. Even though they're not qualifying Athanasio at $3 million and Matt Benning at 1.95, so they're saving $5 million there. But they're also trying to find a goaltender in Jakob Markstrom if Vancouver doesn't sign him. So, they only have so much money to spend, and it's not the only hole they have to fill, unfortunately.
That was another question I was going to ask you. I mean, obviously the Oilers aren't the only ones who'd be interested in the Tyson Barrie. On a short-term deal.
And theoretically, Oscar ran the power play from the left side with all the left shot guys that the Oilers have on their power play, apart from Alex Chason, who would be the net front guy, and he's a right shot guy. So if they got Barrie, then the power play would be run by a right shot defenseman who plays a little differently. And Barrie is a shooter. Oscar is more of a passer, so it would be a little different story. Oscar's smart enough to realize the puck should be in the hands of McDavid and Draisaitl, not him, and he gets the puck to him very efficiently. Barrie is more of a shooter, but sometimes that helps as well. That it opens things up for the other guys because you got a defenseman who can shoot the puck. So I think he'll start with a goalie more than the defenseman. I think he'll start if Vancouver can't sign Markstrom. He'll start with the goalie because that's the goal he wants, along with Calgary wants Markstrom too. So should be interesting. And then he'll go from there. And number two would be a defenseman to replace the two defensemen he's losing, and then a third line center. So lots of balls in play, and I don't think he's going to get all of them done in one day.
Yeah, obviously you've identified the other needs. The Oilers, like and a player, Markstrom, on the goalie side for the Oilers that would be a fit here at Edmonton if obviously if all the dollars work. Let me throw another name out there. If not a Tyson Barrie, there's other players out there who are unrestricted free agents. Sami Vatanen is one of them. Would that be something?
Yes, he would be cheaper, but he's hurt a lot.
And so is Oscar Klefbom.
Truly. But if you're going to go out and get a player, you would want somebody a little more durable because you're replacing a guy who's hurt. You want to sign a guy who's not going to be hurt. And Vatanen has been hurt quite often. Anaheim, New Jersey, he's pretty much moved around. And in Carolina, he's been hurt quite a bit. He would be plan B on pretty much most teams' list if they're looking for an offensive defenseman. You'd like to think you operate in a vacuum. And the GMs do talk to the agents of these players, so I think they have some sort of idea how much it's going to cost, but they don't know how many teams are talking to the agent. They don't know if they're bidding against 2 teams or 4 teams or 6 teams for a player. And I would hope that the Oilers, let's put it this way, the Oilers have saved themselves $5 million on Benning and Athanasio, so that $5 million for 1 year could probably go to Tyson Barrie.
Again, lots of balls in the air, and there's no saying that the Oilers don't try to re-sign Athanasiou or Benning at a cheaper price point, because they weren't going to qualify them at the prices that they would have commanded.
No, but I think they did talk to both players for cheaper contracts, and they chose to. I think in Athanasiou's case, he chose to go to unrestricted because he, rather than take less money, had $3 million, and in Matt Benning's case, he probably was offered something in the $1.2, $1.3 million range, and he's making close to $2 million. So he'll be going to unrestricted as well. I think they did try to get them cheaper, but I think both players, we'll see how it goes. And I guess they could circle back to the Oilers if there's not a market. I think, to be honest, I think there's a bigger market for Benning than there would be for Athanasio. Not because he'd be cheaper, because he's a right shot defenseman. If you notice, there's so many teams with restricted free agents as those two players were, they're not being qualified either. So suddenly there's a whole flood of players becoming unrestricted free agents on Friday, not just guys who you expected to be unrestricted free agent because their contracts were up.
In Athanasiou's case, does Ken Holland, obviously you roll the dice sometimes, but does Ken Holland really worry about having spent 2 second-round picks plus, an unrestricted free agent in Sam Gagner himself? He spent those assets to get him, and here he is a dozen games or so later. And
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he does. And I think he wanted to see Athanasiou play more games so he could get a better read on him. He wasn't counting on him only playing 9 league games. He was probably counting on him playing 20 before the playoffs, and so he'd get a better read for him. But in 13 games, he had 1 goal and 1 assist, and that's not great production. And he did give up 2 second-round draft choices this year and next. He had a book on him because he was the general manager in Detroit. He knew him better than anybody. He's negotiated the contracts. He saw him play. He wanted his speed. He'd still had the speed in Edmonton, but he just couldn't make any plays and couldn't score any goals. So I always go back to the old Glenn Sather line when he was trading for players. He says, you trade for the players if you realize you make a mistake, move on, and do it quickly. Don't hang around. Don't try to compound the problem by saying, you know what, I didn't get a long enough look. I'll wait another year, or I'll sign this guy for 1 year. If you think you made a mistake and it's not turning out, move on, which is what Ken's doing, and it's not his fault. The draft picks he gave up obviously sting now, but it's not his fault that the cap decided to stay at 81. He, like most GMs before the pandemic, he was figuring it was going to be 86 or something like that, and he probably would have had room for $3 million of Athanasiou. But when it stayed at 81, he looked at it and go, "Ooh, $3 million." I was thinking he was a top 6 player, but maybe he's a third liner. That's too much money.
And besides, when you consider the position Athanasiou plays on the wing, and here we have news that Jesse Puljujarvi's back with the Oilers after signing a new 2-year deal. So that must have played a factor in that as well.
Well, I'm sure it did, because they've been talking to Jesse. Now they played. Athanasiou is a left winger. Jesse's a right winger. There are fewer left wingers, which this is another reason why it stings. The Oilers have more right wingers than they do have left wingers. In fact, their third best center is playing left wing, Nugent Hopkins, because they don't have enough left wingers. Whereas on right wing, they've got Kyler Yamamoto, who's on the line with Draisaitl. And then they've got Zach Kassian, and they've got Josh Archibald, and they've got James Neal. They've got Alex Chase on. Now they got Jesse Puljujarvi. It's kind of crowded on that left side. Neal, I guess, can move over left, but Jesse's coming in. He must have looked in the mirror, or he was told often enough that, he should have stayed here with a new coach and a new general manager, but he chose to leave. Sour, what happened in his days after the 2016 draft, and went back to Finland, had a really good year, but played for a lot less money than he would be making if he'd stayed in Edmonton. with his contract up. He played for, I think the going rate in Finland is, maybe 300,000, so we would have been given a raise this past season to $1 million anyway. So he lost a lot of money, and he's come back to prove that he's still a player. And I thought it'd be a 1-year contract, but 2 probably makes more sense. It gives him a little more runway, the team more runway, and Jesse more runway to see if he can fit in Edmonton. And to be brutally honest, I don't think anybody in Edmonton really knows what he is yet. What is he? I mean, is he really a top 6 player, or is he going to be a third line player? 4th overall pick, who's a third line right winger, not a point producer. With I think he's got either 37 or 39 points in his NHL career in about 140 games. So he's not proven he's certainly a top 6 player. And I guess if he signs, he's got 2 years. I guess we'll find out what he is. Is he the 4th overall pick, or is he going to be an NHL player who's on a third line?
On the Oilers' wish list, also a third line center. And who's out there that would fit the bill right now?
There's so many names out there. I haven't heard yet if the Rangers have qualified Ryan Strome, which I think would be mind-boggling if they don't qualify a guy at 59 points. But they don't have a lot of cap room. He'd be perfect to come back to the Oilers. Eric Halla, would be another choice. He's kind of like a Darren Helm type who Holland had in Detroit, very fast. Matthias Janmark, who played in Dallas, is a winger center. Very useful player. I think he could be a third line center. Also, he used to be in Detroit. Kyle Turris is getting bought out by Nashville. He'll be getting a cheap contract. He's still going to get very rich. Nashville still owing him 4 years on his deal. They could get him cheap, but I don't know if he's a third line center. There's lots of players out there that Evan Rodrigues, who went to the Leafs. He used to play in Buffalo. He's a possibility. I don't know. I think if you're going to bring back Jesse Puljujarvi, though, a third line center is pretty important. Jesse needs somebody with enough offensive savvy to get offensive, minutes all the time. So, but I think it's crucial that they find a third line center for Jesse to play with, and who builds some chemistry with the center and Jesse, so that you really see what Jesse can do.